Move on from that. Next week, the government will make its economic forecast in the so-called spring statement. The national balance sheet appears to be improving with the biggest ever monthly surplus in January. It should give the Chancellor more money. But there's one big cloud on the horizon, Brexit. So what's happening here with businesses? Here's our business correspondent, Richard Bond.
It may have been written off by some, but manufacturing is still an important sector in the East, employing nearly 250,000 people. And we still make big things, such as this marine engine. It's taking shape in Colchester, at a company that trades throughout the world. So where's this going to end up?
OK, this is a 12-cylinder high-speed engine which will end up in fast patrol vessels for the Vietnamese customs. And they're typically valued at around about £650,000 each.
MAN Energy Solutions exports everything it makes, mostly to Asia and the Middle East. Europe is a relatively small market, but Brexit is still something that worries the managing director, who's assessed the likely impact.
One of the issues we face is that we don't know how hard the Brexit is going to be. This may introduce a lot of uncertainties with regards to supply chain, some of which are already being affected because of the measures that a lot of operators and freight forwarders are already taking, which of course are causing uncertainty to the delivery of our equipment worldwide.
The company's spent £2.5 million stockpiling components, about a third of which are imported from Europe. It's also put in place plans to use alternative ports in case of hold-ups at places such as Dover. In many ways, this is a company with a great future post-Brexit. Demand for fast patrol vessels, into which its engines are fitted, is growing fast in Asia, and its German owner has invested £4 million in the factory in the last 2 years. But
to attract future investment, all British businesses will require stability. And what we need from all politicians involved in this and all parties involved is a successful Brexit that does not disrupt trade flows.
Uncertainty about the terms of our departure is a highly unsettling thing, and it's getting to many more firms than this one. Muntons at Stowmarket produces malt and malt extract. It's used not just in beer and whiskey, but in brands such as Horlicks and Maltesers. Asia and the USA are the biggest export markets, but even there the Brexit vote unsettled customer confidence.
If Europe is uncertain, people get uncertain about the UK and they wonder if they should place their contracts elsewhere. Take that market in Japan, for example. So they were the first people to come on to us and say, you know, this Brexit thing, we're a little bit worried about the UK now. We think that that might be dangerous to do some business with.
Muntons has been able to allay many of those fears and business continues to grow. But the company fears a hard Brexit on World Trade Organization terms.
If we go to WTO, I think it's quite a nightmare. You could argue that everybody, I suppose, all of our competitors will be in the same boat. But then again, that's within the UK, so our customers potentially could have the ability to go to different countries. And that's the great worry. You could face a tenfold increase in the tariff that we pay.
You have plans to invest, though. Would those plans to invest be undermined by that kind of hard Brexit?
No, we're going to invest more in the next 5 years than the previous 10 to 20. Why is that? Because we're at capacity. There's demand for the product. The demand isn't primarily in Europe. It's in Japan and it's in Asia, really, rather than just Japan, and in America, and they're clamouring for our products.
So growth is on the way, but businesses like this are looking to politicians to bring an end to the Brexit uncertainty.
Well, let's speak to Chris Starkie, who's Chief Executive of the new Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership. Both of them say they want more certainty, but actually we're going to get that in 2 or 3 weeks' time, probably, aren't we?
Well, hopefully we will. Businesses really need certainty because the number one issue they've been facing over the past long months has been what exactly is the deal we're going to get, or if there's no deal, what that'll actually mean. It's a real issue for businesses. We speak to businesses every day and they're trying desperately to plan. There's reams of information coming out of government about what they should do, and it's just a difficult time for them.
Is that too much information coming out of government?
Well, I was looking at my Brexit preparedness email I get from government, and it was we get one every week, and it's getting longer. And the amount of information, and it's helpful information, but when you've got information from the Department of International Trade, from the Food Agency, from HM Customs, 14 different sector information packs, and you're a small business, you haven't really got time to wade through all of that weight of information, which is why our bigger concern is not the businesses who are making preparations, and the two companies illustrated today are obviously taking it very seriously and rightly so, but the thousands of businesses who simply aren't doing anything because they don't really know what to do.
Are they not doing anything because they've got their heads in the sand then, or what?
Well, I think there's a combination of things. There are genuinely some businesses who don't think they will be affected or impacted by it. I think there are those who think it'll be all right on the night and something will be pulled out at the last minute. And there are those who their day job is taking up all of their time. It's really hard to set aside resources and investment and time in preparing for something that you don't know quite how it's going to turn out.
So would business like something in the spring statement? If there was something they could put in the spring statement this week, what would it be?
Well, I think the biggest thing in the spring statement is around government concentrating on something other than Brexit. So greater recognition of the importance of the East as a region, investment in infrastructure, and in a way, the government proving that it's getting on with the day job of running the country.
Do you think that that's not happening then?
Well, we know from our own experience just how many civil servants and how much ministerial time is focused just on Brexit and not dealing with what we think are the key issues. How do you improve infrastructure, broadband? How do you invest in our road infrastructure? How do you provide support for businesses? So we'd like to see the Chancellor talk about measures that he wants to introduce as soon as possible to help stimulate the economy, because we know uncertainty is creating a slowdown in the economy, and we want the government to react to that.
Chris Starkey, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Are you aware that the government is concentrating so much on Brexit that nothing else is happening?
So obviously the government is concentrating on Brexit and doing a great deal to ensure that we're ready for any scenario, whether that's no deal or preparations for the deal if the deal is passed. But I think it would be wrong to say that the government is doing nothing else. I'm a minister in the Ministry of Justice. We've just launched our legal aid strategy plan, our vision for the future. We're in the process of a £1 billion court reform programme, which is ongoing, which enables people to interact much more easily with the courts online. So business is still happening in government.
But not perhaps as in the way that it would have done if we hadn't been worried about Brexit. Well, that has to be the case, doesn't it?
Obviously, yes. There is a significant amount of work for each department to do to prepare for Brexit. But that's not to say there isn't other work going on. I'm now in the middle of my third bill in the last year. So none of those are Brexit-related bills. So that's passing legislation, that's reform programmes going forward, and locally as well. You know, locally we have got various projects which we're pressing on infrastructure, which Chris mentioned, the A10, you know, the building of a station in Soham. Those are still going on at local level as well.
Do you believe that the business of government has kind of stalled while this big subject is?
Yeah, I mean, it's really obvious. I've been an MP for the best part of a decade. I've never seen a parliament in such dysfunction. The only business the government can get through is the uncontroversial stuff, because if it's controversial, they don't have the votes. And on the biggest example of that, Brexit, you know, we're meant to be leaving this month. And there is just a sense of drift as both parties run down the clock. It's a really bad way.
So, to make you feel better about it all, okay, what can the Chancellor say this week in the spring statement?
Look, the spring statement is going to be dominated by Brexit one way or another, not least of all because since we left, the uncertainty talked about in the piece there has meant the economy is 1.5% smaller than it otherwise would have been.
But we've just had the biggest surplus in a month ever.
Right. Fantastic news.
Yeah.
But the overall size of the pie is much smaller than it otherwise would have been, because businesses aren't investing and productivity isn't going up and so on.
But we just heard that those two businesses there, although they were worried about it, are investing. One of them's from a German owner.
Absolutely, but that isn't true across the whole piece. And think about businesses in my patch, EasyJet, opening headquarters in Vienna so they can continue to fly. Vauxhall pointing out that they can't put any more investment in until there's certainty over this. And what's likely to happen this week is a series of votes that get us to the point of punting the ball forward 3 more months of greater uncertainty. You know, there needs to be some resolution on this process.
You wouldn't argue there needs to be some resolution?
I absolutely think there needs to be certainty for business, for people, for citizens, you know, both here and in the EU. I've voted for the Prime Minister's deal at every stage because I think the Prime Minister's deal, whilst it isn't perfect, whilst there are issues with it, the backstop,
Do you know, every time a politician sits there, if they voted for it, the next line is, while it's not perfect.
Well, it isn't perfect. It doesn't deliver on everything that everybody wanted. And the Prime Minister herself said when she first set out the deal to Parliament...
This is not perfect.
No, she said, I'm uncomfortable with the backstop. So she's admitted right from the beginning that it isn't a perfect arrangement. And the reason it's not perfect is because we're in a negotiation and you have to have compromise in a negotiation. But what the deal does is enable us to move forward as a country, give businesses certainty so that we can get on with our domestic agenda, which we touched upon, and other matters too.
We'll move on. We'll move on to the local elections.